A very warm welcome to Cafe Enable. Our session today is going to follow a World Cafe approach. And the World Cafe is a structured conversational process designed to facilitate open, intimate discussion, link ideas within a larger group to access the collective intelligence in the room. It's based on the belief that people, so all of us here today, already have within them the wisdom to create, wisdom and creativity to confront even some of the most difficult challenges. And here's how we're going to be adapting the World Cafe approach for introducing you to our Enabling Accessible Blended Learning for Equity, Enable framework today. So we've created a cafe-like environment in our virtual space to encourage a relaxed and open atmosphere. We will be exploring different components of our Enable framework in small group discussions, where we'll be mimicking what we're calling table conversations in a cafe. Each group will focus on one component or one element of Enable of our framework with a dedicated host to guide the discussion. We'll use a menu structure, starters, entrees, takeaways, to organize our conversations today, and to ensure that we cover some key points related to the element. We'll conclude by bringing everybody back into this space to share our collective insights and gather some feedback. And just as cafe patrons might move between tables, we'll have opportunities to share insights between groups, where we share our takeaway from the session. So what we're hoping is that this approach will allow us to introduce you to an Enable framework in a non-overwhelming way, and for you to spend some time with other colleagues who enjoy thinking about one component of the framework. We also hope that this approach encourages some active participation because there's smaller groups, some cross-pollination of ideas, and collaborative learning, which we see as all crucial elements in developing equitable blended learning strategies. We also hope in the session to practice what we preach in this framework. So we want to ensure that this space is inclusive and is encouraging participation from a wide range of voices. I'm sad to say that I don't think my audio was playing. It's just imagine really beautiful, gentle cafe music as you were imagining that we're entering a cafe.
Mishka, if you'd like to share your audio, you can actually close your screen, close your sharing. And once you start sharing again, before you click confirm, there's a box on the right-hand side that you need to check to share the sound.
I did that. For some reason, it's not working. I'm not sure why. Very strange. Hopefully it will not be the case for the other part. We've got more music, so don't worry. There'll be another opportunity to listen to music. Okay. So hopefully everybody's feeling grounded and like they've arrived in the space. I'm sorry I'm not in presenter view, but we're going to just quickly go over to, oh, I see the reason. It's muted at the top. 5 seconds. Imagine that in the background as I was introducing. I'm going to start us off with a little bit of a warm-up, and we're going to use a tool called WooClap. So you should see my WooClap screen. I'm going to display here. And what you can do is if you have a mobile device, if you have a phone, you can take it out and you can open up your camera app and you can scan this QR code that you're seeing on your screen right now. Or if your camera phone is not able to do that, you can go to wooclap.com, either on your phone or your laptop. You can enter in the event code, which is UTRSTQ. Will one of my colleagues please put that in the chat, or somebody? UTRSTQ. Brilliant. I've got 7 people who have joined, so I'm going to give a few more seconds just to gather all of us folks in this one space. Okay. Trying to see if there's a quick way to see how many people are on the call, so I know that we've gathered, or all people are gathered here.
We've got 12 participants here.
Thanks.
The rest are co-facilitators or co-hosts.
Okay. Okay, we've got 11. And I think that's it. Okay, so the first question is, are you familiar with WooClap? So the way that you vote is you'll see on your screen 3 options and you tap on the one that is relevant to you. Number 1 is, yes, I've used it before. Number 2, kind of, I used it a long time ago, or I've only used it once or twice. And 3, no, I've never used it. I don't feel confident using it. Okay. So most people haven't used it before and aren't confident. Well, congratulations. If I were to ask the same question again, you can say, yes, I have used it before. And this is basically an intro to using WooClap, is that you get given on the screen a question and you have an opportunity to vote or share your opinion or voice. And there are different ways that you can engage with the question. I'm going to show you another way to engage with the question. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Okay. So this question is asking you where you're at right now, how you're feeling. And you'll see these little yellow people are on a tree and in a tree, and they have different dispositions. They feel differently. And if you were to say, use these little people as a reference for how you're feeling right now, you can click on any one that resonates with you. Somebody's feeling a little bit down and out there. And somebody's feeling good, which is great. So you just click on any one of these little people that resonate with you and how you're feeling. Nice. Somebody is a support to someone. Someone is barely holding on. I'm so sorry. Somebody is seated safely, but arms are crossed. Hopefully by the end of the session, you'll feel more open, but also no pressure. We receive you as you are. Someone's feeling uplifted. Wonderful. Oh, somebody is just lying beneath the tree. I'm so sorry, whoever you are. Somebody's falling down. Number 14 over here. So sorry about that. Okay, so we're a range of people in the room today. This is a really useful way to gauge where people are at. And so keep this in mind as you engage in your breakout rooms. And we as hosts will keep this in mind as we engage in this presentation. Is that some people feel on top of the world and some people feel like they're falling from a tree. Okay, let me move to the next one. So this is an open-ended question. So you're going to have to do a bit of typing. The question is, and think for a moment, share a memorable experience you've had with online or blended learning that made you think differently about equity in education. So take your time, type it out, and when you are ready, you can press submit. It is a good name for an app. Woo. Yeah, true. Take your time. Don't feel stressed by the silence. Enjoy it. We often don't have space in the day to just sit in silence and write responses to stuff. So don't feel stressed. Type up your thoughts and take your time. Oh, thank you, Janet. If WooClap is not your friend or you just prefer to use the chat, please share your memorable experience you've had with online or blended learning that made you think differently about equity in education in the chat space. That's also totally fine. MYFest. So these are fantastic. I'd love to hear a bit more about some of these. See. Having the ability to meet with facilitators online. Yes, so true. It can be so tough when you're completely an online student to feel disconnected. So having that human connection, yeah, it makes a big difference. My first MOOC, massive open online course. Yeah, because you have to think quite seriously when you're designing and when you're taking. It makes you think about equity, or for better or for worse. When I had students attending class sitting in their cars in parking lots to use Wi-Fi during COVID. COVID was a huge one. It really made us think about how equitable our teaching and learning practices are or aren't. A poorly managed blended session by me made me very aware of consciously open and enabling spaces. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think we've all experienced that, where we feel like we've maybe done a disservice to our students, or we wish we pivoted, or we would do things differently. I think that makes you a good teacher. Always jumping about. Teaching school children, I'm just going to click on one. Teaching school children online was one was on video roller skating around their bedroom while others could not access the video. Whoa. It made for and represented very different means of engaging with online learning. Yes, so true. When you kind of have to, you're being projected into your students' rooms during COVID is really tough, and you have to kind of traverse and navigate multiple spaces. Yeah, some really great ones. The thrill of sitting in a global open virtual classroom and meeting others, and so many other more. We'll share the results of these, so keep them coming in. I'm going to keep this open, but I'm now going to pivot to our presentation, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Janet. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mishka. So I thought I'll put my camera on. There we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Janet from the UCT team, and I'm going to be doing a little bit of the intro about what's on the menu today at our Cafe Enable. Well, we're going to be focusing on equity, and I think that's something that's close to everybody's hearts, that I've come to hear from the conversations at MYFest. So we'll be talking about the ENABLE framework, which stands for Enabling Accessible Blended Learning for Equity. And this is a framework that's been developed in our institution to look at designing blended learning. And this is a screenshot from the landing page of the website where you can navigate to the resources. And as you can see from a glance, it's got quite a lot of recognizable elements like course planning, student-centered learning, responsive teaching, assessment, evaluation, and so on. So just click again. So you might be saying to yourself, well, what, another framework? And there's a picture of a very puzzled looking person on the slide here, thanks to Copilot, who generated me a very nice puzzled looking person image. Go on to the next slide, please. So I think the thing we want to say about the Enable framework is that it's not like that it's everything about it is new, not at all, but it's been generated out of our local context. It was made in South Africa. And I think, unfortunately for us, a very, very key feature of life in South Africa, we were just talking to Yasser about this at the beginning, is inequality. And that comes out of our history of deep oppression from colonial powers and the apartheid system. And while those are no longer legislative or legal frameworks, we still have the legacy of disadvantage and discrimination from those systems. And one way in which you know that this is still such a prevalent problem is that we have the unfortunate I don't know, leaderboard in the highest Gini coefficient in the world. And then, if those of you who haven't heard of the Gini coefficient, it's basically a measure of income distribution in countries, and it talks about the gap between the richest and the poorest. And South Africa is the head of the world in the biggest gap between the rich and the poor, which is not something we're very proud of, but it obviously is a very huge issue in our environment. And we're working in higher education in South Africa. And one of the things we see from this history is you see academic underperformance by race and class metrics. So this is our really, really deep context. And as we were discussing in those examples just previously, we've recently come out of an experience of the COVID-19 lockdown and our pretty hectic, I think, worldwide experience of flipping over into teaching online. And I think that reinforced and showed up the disadvantage that can happen or can be exacerbated in online spaces where people might struggle with access. The story of someone sitting in a car park to get Wi-Fi access, data costs, devices, and digital literacy, and all the story you know about. This is not all a story about challenges and barriers. As you know, South Africa also has had a proud history of struggle, and most recently in our university environment, the student protest movements of Rose Must Fall and Fees Must Fall have really put students' needs into the forefront of thinking in the university. And so there's a much more acknowledgement of the need to have student-focused sort of policies and the way in which things are approached. And the decolonizing the curriculum movement that arose out of these struggles is quite a strong agenda still. We've still got a long way to go, but there are many projects that are tackling this problem. So in all of this, this is where Enable's landing. So our university has a Vision 2030, which talks about creating a digitally enabled education ecosystem of the future. And we wanted to look at the way in which we can do that. So we were very fortunate to get a grant from the Department of Higher Education in South Africa. It's called a University Capacity Development Grant. And we were focusing on blended learning and equity. That's the context of our project, to create the Enable framework. Can you advance a slide? Thank you. So the ingredients that went into making up this framework were like a fusing of local and global themes. These ones are familiar to all of you. So looking at it and creating an enabling environment. Accessibility was a very, very big focus, bringing in universal design for learning. We're looking at blended learning, as mentioned, and obviously equity is the kind of dominant theme of what we're trying to devise in terms of a framework with that as a forefront consideration. So the way in which that was developed is we had a 3-year university-sponsored project called Redesigning Blended Courses. Its intention was to promote models for blended learning which foregrounded equity and inclusivity using a universal design for learning and social justice framing. The project was a very wide team of people, including learning designers, and our colleagues here in the room have been involved in it. We're all from the learning design side of the university's kind of staff, plus scholars in universal design for learning, accessibility practitioners, and as well as we had 10 part-time student assistants who worked with us in the project. So the way in which we created the framework was we spent quite a bit of time looking at relevant literature, both local and international, around the themes of social justice, blended learning, and universal design for learning. And we then also gathered case study material and put these two into kind of a conversation about how to identify elements and key parts of designing learning that would really make an impact on equity and inclusivity. And out of this, we distilled and refined a framework which has been published as a set of open education resources published under a CC BY license, which means they're free to be shared as long as there's attribution. And the framework has been reviewed by some peers, and we are revising it, and we will continue to revise it as time goes by. So we also look forward to feedback from you. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Lauren to now take you through a bit more of the details of what's in the framework. Thanks. Over to you, Lauren.
Thank you, Janet. Mishka, I would like to share my screen if you could, if I can.
Yes, of course. Let me stop. Okay, Go for it.
Thank you. Screen. Okay, thank you. I'll continue to talk about the Enable framework and going into a bit more detail about what it is exactly. I mean, we keep talking about we've created this thing it was for our context, and it came out of the background of what Janet gave us now. But now we are going to take a look at what is it exactly. So on the slide that is up at the moment, I want to indicate one thing that the Enable framework is not, and that it's not a learning design process. It's not a sort of procedural system to work through. The Enable framework consists of elements that speak to different areas of learning design and teaching and learning, but it doesn't have to be followed in a procedural manner. It's a framework that includes principles for equitable blended learning. There are learning theories that are applied in various strategies explained in the framework. The pedagogical strategies are outlined, and then there are also recommendations about appropriate tools to use, linked to the various strategies or practices that can be applied. The next slide, I want to preview a little bit about that. On the next slide, I have a little video that will take us through the actual documents that are in the Enable framework. So I'm going to talk through as the video plays, but it is going to be a couple of documents that open after clicking on various links. So as Janet said in the beginning, you can find the Enable framework on our website. So the video starts off on our webpage where the Enable framework is linked. And you can see that our Enable framework diagram sort of wants to illustrate how or what is included in the Enable framework. And I'm going to start on the left-hand side of the diagram that says deliberative course planning. The next one is student-centered learning. Then there is responsive teaching and online engagement, flexible assessment and feedback, expansive evaluation and reflection. And at the top, you can see there is accessible course materials and technology. And in the middle, there's a little smile-like shape that says communication. And what we try to indicate in the diagram is that communication is an element that sort of applies to all of the other elements. Within each of the other 6 elements, there are aspects related to communication in teaching and learning. So it's sort of an overarching element. The same with accessible materials and technology. In any of the other elements, whatever materials are used or technologies are used, they have to be accessible and suitable. So that both of those elements are more applicable to all of the other elements rather than something on its own. Okay, now that we looked briefly at the elements, I'm going to go into the framework and the documents. Okay. We will give it a moment to start playing. Okay, so as I said, we are on the Enable web page, and when you scroll down, you can see that we have linked the overview document of each of the elements. and I'm going to use student-centered learning as an example to show you what the documents look like. You can see at the top of the document, it says back to enable framework. So it will always take you back to the landing page on the website. You can see there are topics, key features, UDL connections indicated. And I want to go into another level of documents. So I'll click on active learning, which opens up in a new tab. And again, you can see the enable framework link to the web page at the top there. So this document includes strategies for how to apply the topic that we clicked on. This one is about active learning. So there are various strategies and descriptions of how to apply active learning or how to encourage active learning in classrooms, as well as the UDL principle or checkpoint related to it. I'm going to go into another level of documents, an example of active learning. And in this document, again, you can go back to the main web page where enable is listed. So you can see that the document includes some theory, or an explanation and further strategies for applying specifically learning by engaging with others in and out of classroom. Another document that I'll open is group work for students, an example of learning by engaging, where you can see more examples of strategies to apply and descriptions of how it might work when you want to use it in your learning space. So that is an intro to the Enable Framework documents, and I hope it wasn't overwhelming. We have found that people might find it a bit too much at first, but we really want to give you a slow introduction and sort of an easing into the framework, which is comprehensive and has over 100 documents in it as a whole. I can't remember the exact number, but there are a lot of documents. So now a little bit of a heads up before I go into a bit more detail on each of the elements, but I want to let you know that at our Cafe Enable, we have 6 tables, and the 6 tables are for each of the elements. And later on, at the after I went through all of the elements, you will be able to select one of the tables based on the element that you're interested in. So I'm going to go through the 6 briefly. So keep in mind which one sparks interest for you, and then you can select the table accordingly. Okay, so to start with, deliberative course planning, and we came up with a key question related to each of the elements. For deliberative course planning, the key question is, how responsive is the course to the needs of students and society? So this is a question to keep in mind as you go about doing course planning. The main topics under deliberative course planning include student profile, critical curriculum alignment, and inclusive learning outcomes. And within each of those topics, there are subtopics and strategies on how to apply these 3 main topics. Moving on to the next element, which is student-centered learning. The key question here is, how best might students learn to engage with the course given their strengths, constraints, and interests? So that's the key question in the student-centered learning element. And there are 3 main topics in this element, which are autonomy and individualization, active learning, and collaboration. Active learning is the example that we went into in the video, where you could see that once you click on active learning, you can select a strategy on how to apply that. And the strategy then gives you further examples of how you might incorporate it in your teaching and learning. Moving on to the next element, which is responsive teaching and online engagement. And here the key question is, how might lecturers best support student participation in the course? And there are 3 topics in this element, which are illicit prior learning, active listening by lecturers, and providing sufficient guided instruction. Okay. And then moving on to the next element, flexible assessment and feedback. And here the key question is, how best can students demonstrate their learning and lecturers provide relevant, constructive, and timely feedback? So it's about students demonstrating what they learned and lecturers providing feedback as well. And then this element includes the topics of types of assessment, types of feedback, and then self-assessment and peer assessment. And there are various types of assessments and types of feedback that we have included in this element that you can explore a little bit further. And then the next element is expansive evaluation and reflection. And here the key question is, how best can lecturers solicit evaluation of the course from various stakeholders and optimize the insights for current and future student cohorts? So we really want to emphasize that there are different stakeholders involved, and it's useful to get feedback from as many as possible, but then also implementing the feedback, either for current or for future student cohorts. And the 3 main topics in this element are self-monitoring by students, regular course evaluation, and then self-evaluation by the lecturer. Okay, then moving on to our next element, which is accessible materials using suitable technology. And here the key question is, how can accessible materials and tools be used and adapted to best support students' learning and lecturers' teaching? And we have 2 main topics in this element, namely creating accessible materials and selecting suitable technologies. I want to briefly mention that communication is an element that are still under development, so we've not included it in our tables for today. So the 6 tables will be focusing on the 6 elements that I spoke about just now. And I think this is where I hand back to you, Mishka.
Thanks, Lauren. I can do this one. You can continue sharing for me if that's okay.
Yes,
Brilliant.
I'll do that.
Okay, thank you so much for that priming, Lauren. So yes, folks, what you're going to now be confronted with is you are going to have to make a choice. So Lauren has showed you and explained how the 6 elements of the Enable framework, what it focuses on. And in your mind, you were thinking about what you're most interested in or something that you've always wanted to explore. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up breakout rooms, and I'll give the indication shortly. When to do that, I just want to give these instructions, and you'll be able to select a room. So we're not going to push you into any particular room, but you're going to select, and in the title of the room will be one of the Enable element names that Lauren just covered. And each of your Enable rooms will have a dedicated host. Thanks. Next slide, please, Lauren. Thank you very much. There are some table manners. We would please love if you would remain seated for the duration of your so-called meal. We would love to just be able to spend the time with you for the duration of the breakout room time. And where possible, if you feel comfortable, if you have data, to switch on your camera so you can see each other. Please be conscious of any images you share, and please use alt text if you can, or describe it in the chat, or unmute yourself and describe it. Your table is meant to be a safe space for reflection and genuine curiosity. So please, may we foster that. That's totally aligned with MYFest. So let's just extend that to our breakaway rooms. Please, can you participate? But what we are trying to say is that do it in the way that feels comfortable to you and that you're able to do. So if it means unmuting yourself and speaking, I feel very comfortable doing that. Go ahead and do that. If not, use the chat, use the Zoom chat. And finally, and most importantly, please enjoy. So now I'm going to tell my colleague Lovejoy that we want to set the breakout room duration for 35 minutes, please. And while he's setting that up in your mind, just make your final decisions. And you should see the breakout rooms have come up, are showing on your screen, and you should be able to choose either deliberative course planning, student-centered learning, responsive teaching, flexible assessment, expansive evaluation, or accessible materials. Okay. And my hosts, please go ahead and select your allocated tables, and we'll just give folks some time to join the tables that they'd love to join. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. We'll see you in 35 minutes back in the main room for some feedback and closing. Catch you on the other side.